Now on 4, the meteorological gives way to the magical as we exchange mist for mystification with a new series, The Mind of David Berglas.
About 35 years ago, in 1985, I suddenly had a request from Channel 4. They were a fairly new channel, and they were very experimental, particularly the managing director, Jeremy Isaacs, who wanted to put on different kinds of shows that hadn't been seen before. And he asked me to put on some kind of mysterious series of unusual things. Well, I wasn't really prepared to do that because I hadn't been on television for a while on purpose. It sounds very conceited to say I refused television sets, but I had my fill. 1950s, 60s, 70s, I was on television all the time. I then decided to stay off television so that my children could grow up in a normal atmosphere rather than being the son or daughter of somebody who's on television. Because I had seen a lot of that from my other show business friends, and all the children suffered quite a lot by not being respected as themselves. Anyway, I decided I would do the series and then had to find a suitable place because in my mind I needed 5 different presentation areas. I needed somewhere where I would introduce the show, I needed somewhere where I would introduce my guests, I needed somewhere where audience could sit with the stage in front of them, and a couple of other areas. And eventually I found in Soho the moving picture company that had a studio large enough for me to plan my sets. And then my producer and director, a man called Royston Mayo, who was very experienced and we had worked before, said, "I'm sorry, but we have to stop because I've just been promoted to be the head of light entertainment at Tyne Tees Television in Newcastle, and I may not be back for 2 or 3 years." Well, of course it was a big blow at that moment because we'd been planning and designing and I had props made and ready to go. And he gave me an alternative. He said, either you can wait 2 or 3 years before I come back, or you can come up to Newcastle and we'll do the show up there. Well, I thought about it and I thought that would be very difficult because all my contacts were around the London area. But eventually I agreed because all that preparation would have been wasted. So I travelled up to Newcastle twice a week, either by train or plane, without knowing anyone up there, and it was very difficult to get into the swing of things, but at least they had large studio spaces, and I managed to get a much better set than I would have had in London. A great big area for an audience, with a performing area in front of them, a presentation area where I could introduce my guests and was more intimate and so on. Well, Tyne Tees were very excited because they hadn't had a major series like that before, and they produced a publicity kit which looked like this. It says the Mind of David Berglas. These flashes around represent the light sculptures that are used. In fact, I introduced light sculptures, or plasma globes as some people call them, on another television program for the BBC. So that was the cover of the publicity kit. When you opened up, the first thing you saw was a brochure about a venue that they'd found for me. They wanted to make it as mysterious as possible, and they found a place up in Northumberland called Bamburgh Castle. As you can see, it is very dramatic, overlooking the North Sea, windswept, about 50 miles north of Newcastle and about 75 miles south of Edinburgh. It gives you some idea, but it was on the coast overlooking the sea. And at night they would floodlit the moat and the castle and looked even more dramatic like that. And right in the tower of the castle was a small window, so they showed the outside of the castle, and then the camera apparently zoomed in through that small window, and I was discovered on a minstrel gallery with some bookcases behind me, and then I would do my opening introduction.
If I were to ask if you believed in legends, you'd probably say no, of course you didn't.
Unfortunately, some of those introductions were written for me, and they weren't exactly what I would have said, but time was short, so I had to go along with that. And it talked about all kinds of things like urban legends and ghosts and various apparitions and other paranormal things, which only partly fitted into my show.
And then there are those stories of flying saucers and people who can bend metal using only the power of their mind.
And then I would walk down the steps to introduce my guests and finally join them. Now, all my guests were always formally dressed in the sitting room area, in the dining room area, but they never mixed with the public. And whenever I talked to my guests, I was formally dressed too. But when I appeared in front of the public, I was casually dressed, as were the audience. Of course, what the audience didn't realize is that all the shows for the public I actually recorded on the same day as later on in the evening when my guests came along. But I used to say to the guests, it so happens that I've done a show once on that topic. Would you like to see it?
I did do a show where I tried to demonstrate it doesn't have to be coins, keys, or cutlery, that I actually did it with steel rods. Now, even better, it wasn't me. I got someone else to do it. If you'd like to see it, I have it set up on the latest disc. Have a look and I'll show you.
And then, as I had all kinds of gadgets and gimmicks on the set, I would press a remote control, a panel would slide open, like a bookcase sliding open with a screen behind it, and they would watch one of my television shows, which they thought had been recorded months before or even years before. What they didn't know was I'd recorded that day. So it was very hard work to work with the audience, work with the guests, and see to all the other things. There was one unfortunate thing about these shows, that my producer, Royston Mayer, and the rest of the crew all believed that I could do all these things without any kind of rehearsal or planning. And of course that's not true. It's just the end product has to look as if it's not been planned and it's just impromptu. So I probably didn't get enough rehearsal time for some of these shots. In the first one, for instance, I was demonstrating what we call telekinesis, the moving of an object by mind control. Whether you believe in it or not, it's up to the magician to prove that it can exist in the magician's hands.
I brought along a few little metal bars. Let's tip these out, see if I can find a few. There we go.
And normally, when something is levitated or floats, it's either a feather or a piece of paper or a treasury note bunched up or a cork, something very light. Well, I tried to do it with something very heavy, a little metal bar.
Yes. Let me see if I can actually demonstrate to you that we can do something like that.
And that floated, which is the first time that I had ever done it, and I think it's the first time it was ever seen.
How fantastic. Oh. It's not got a string on it.
No, otherwise you would see something. I mean,
How
you couldn't
incredible.
be closer than that, could you?
Delight.
And then I managed to get it to float in between the hand of one of my guests, Ingrid Pitt. And I can assure you that she was not in on it, had no idea how it worked, yet I put her hand underneath, one above, and the little bar floated in between her hands, another first.
Fantastic. Well done. That's incredible. That really is something. Well done.
Also, I had given them a very heavy cube, about the size of a Rubik's cube, made of heavy plastic with different colors on each side. And they'd been examining that all the time before we came on the air.
People get very suspicious, and you can't blame them. But you brought along a cube which I gave you earlier today,
Yeah.
and you've had a good look at it.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And you've had a good look at that too.
Yep.
Now, that cube is just a cube made out of plastic. It's fairly heavy, but the idea now is for me to try and seal it into a container, which I have over here.
I then placed it into a cylindrical tube, which was sealed both ends, so that you could not get to it.
Now that's sealed. That's a solid lid there and a solid lid there, and there are no holes anywhere.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting part. If I put it here, can you turn around?
Yes. Yeah.
Completely isolated, I will try and make that move.
Oh, you can't do that.
I know it seems impossible, but I tell you, it's not quite the same because the hand won't come into this, nor the mind.
Yet, when I put on my light sculptures,
I must tell you, you can see this much better when the lights are down. So let me just switch the lights down a bit. And if you watch closely, as I manipulate these, first of all, you get some rather pretty patterns happening. Can you see that?
Yes.
And these are amazing things. They're called light sculptures. And by holding the two and putting the cube in between, about there, I should be able to get it to do something.
somehow it rose up the tube and down again.
Now that's fully charged now, and the incredible thing is,
People thought maybe there's some magnet in my desk, so I took it off the desk,
we can actually try this now ourselves.
put it in front of Christopher Lee.
And as you can see, there is, of course, no connection. At the moment, it's still staying up there. I'd like you to take your hand in a moment and keep your hand there and just move it up and down a bit like that. When you do that, just don't worry about anything. Just do that. Now, I have to tell you, it's not going to work that way, but I'm going to ask you.
And by holding onto the light sculpture with one hand, holding Ingrid Pitt's hand with my other hand, and she finally holding Christopher Lee's hand, he managed to put his hand up and down the tube, and sure enough, the cube rose and lowered.
And down again, Christopher.
I wish I could do that with my salary.
I have a feeling you're not taking this seriously. Stop there. All right. Now, if you'd like to hold
And
this
finally, I gave the tube to Ingrid Pitt
so we can see
for her to do it herself.
And once again, I will touch this, and I'll see if I can get it to come up again.
Oh, it won't work.
It does.
Look, I can do that too. No, he's doing it. Oh, David, you're
you're both doing
incredible.
And when I let go, it is still working because it's still fully charged at the moment, but then it will probably go down
No, I don't
as you
want it
relax.
to. No,
Well, will it to go up and it'll go
I
up?
want it to go up.
Well, try.
She gets rather excited by trying to get the tube to go up, and when it goes down, she's virtually shouting that she wants things to go up.
Up. Come on. More. Yes. Come on.
I think you ought to relax before we get too excited. Get it to go down.
Wonderful. Oh.
But those are the sort of things that I created for the show, which I don't think had been seen before.
There you are.